Okay, I know what this looks like. It's not another Sonic video. I promise you that. It's not another Sonic video.
I can explain.
Look, I'm entirely aware that 5 Sonic videos in a row is a lot. Maybe too much for most stable-minded individuals. And that's totally fine, totally understandable. I don't want to brag, but I know everything there is to know about Sonic, and it's clear some of you just aren't ready to take on the daunting task of even beginning to comprehend the all-encompassing breadth of my all-knowing Sonic omnipotence. Weirdly enough, though, this is the first and only time that a Sonic racing game has opted to have you race on foot rather than in a vehicle. Not true, there's also Sonic Rivals? That doesn't fucking count. Hey guys, I just wanted to apologize for what I said about Sonic Riders. Riders? Oh, Sonic Rivals. Who fucking cares about Sonic Rivals? Hey guys, I just wanted to apologize. We're on the same page, you and I. It's time to step away from Sonic for a bit and give this channel some much needed variety.
If you're nothing without
Sonic,
then you shouldn't have it, okay?
I mean, I can't talk about Sonic all the time. That'd be insane, right? I mean, right? Genuinely, I'm literally asking you, would it be insane? Because I can keep making Sonic videos if that's a socially acceptable thing to do. Except you didn't account for the fact that I was lying the whole time. Fuck you, Sonic, and fuck you too. I've never liked Sonic. Now that my hatred for Sonic the Hedgehog has finally been proclaimed to the world, it's time to pivot this channel's focus to a vastly superior video gaming icon. That's right, baby, I'm talking about
Dr. Robotnik and Tails.
Something I've always found particularly interesting is when long-standing franchises experiment with spin-offs starring supporting characters. These spin-offs can go a long way in expanding the scope of the original property, and the results of these efforts can either be a really interesting new angle on the original franchise or, you know, whatever this is. But this concept of giving supporting characters the spotlight is certainly no stranger to the medium of video games. I mean, look at the Mario franchise. You could argue that the entire Super Mario Bros. Series of games is just a gigantic, enormously successful spin-off of the Donkey Kong arcade game. And even if you disagree with this line of thinking, the Super Mario series itself has plenty of games that feature otherwise secondary characters in a starring role. I mean, you've got the Princess Peach game, you've got the Captain Toad game. I mean, you even have characters with entire series of games like Luigi and Wario that are still receiving new entries on a relatively frequent basis. Now, Nintendo's been at this for a long time, almost as long as Mario himself has been a thing. So, as you might imagine, it would only make sense for Sega to do the same thing with their flagship character and Mario's former rival, Sonic the Hedgehog. And, well, they did technically do that, for a little while anyway. There were a number of games starring Sonic's friends back in the day, particularly when Sega was still manufacturing consoles. So, did it work out? Well, in a word, no. But these games aren't as catastrophically bad as you might think, for the most part. The first game I want to talk about, which I guess is also the first non-Sonic Sonic game to be released, is Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Even if you're a fucking zoomer who only knows about Sonic through the movies, then this still might sound familiar to you. That's because this game's title was actually referenced in the name of the cafe that serves as Robotnik's secret base in Sonic 2, which is a pretty awesome way to reference this game, actually. But anyway, this game was a westernized alteration of the, at the time, Japan-only falling block puzzle game Puyo Puyo, which if you've been playing games for a while, you're probably already familiar with. Interestingly, this is actually the first time that a Puyo Puyo game was ever released outside Japan. Originally, the game featured characters based on a separate game called Mado Monogatari? I don't fucking know, I don't speak weeb. Which was some kind of dungeon-crawling role-playing game, so I guess you could say Puyo Puyo itself is sort of a spin-off in its own way. But I guess Sega figured that Westerners wouldn't care as much for this anime aesthetic and opted instead to have the game rebranded to center around Dr. Robotnik. But I'm not just talking about any Dr. Robotnik. No, no, no. We're talking about the adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog Dr. Robotnik, which, if you weren't aware, is the best and only Dr. Robotnik that fucking matters. Mostly because he's in that funny meme where he says, "Pingers!" The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog was a cartoon that aired in the 90s that took a really lighthearted Looney Tunes style approach to Sonic the Hedgehog. I'll spare you the details because I think I want to save my thoughts on this cartoon for a potential future video, but basically all you need to know is that Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine pulls its characters and general concept from the TV show. That said, there are really only 4 significant characters from the show that make appearances here, just Coconuts, Scratch, Grounder, and Dr. Robotnik. Sonic doesn't even show up for as much as a cameo in the game, which I gotta wonder, why the fuck not? I'm onto you, Sonic. I know you don't think you're too good for puzzle games. I remember Sonic Eraser. The rest of the characters here do technically appear in the show, but they only make brief appearances in 1 or 2 episodes. Honestly, it's kind of disgusting how many whiny, entitled brats there are out there begging for the return of such niche and unimportant features as the Chow Garden, or momentum-based platforming, or competently made video games. But I haven't heard a single person even so much as mention such underrated and iconic characters as Squeal. What the hell is wrong with all of you? I'm tired of waking up in a cold sweat, panicking fervently, feverishly, that one day Squeal will be forgotten and this masterpiece of character design will never receive the recognition he so rightfully— What was his fucking name again? Really sorry to all the Puyo Puyo fans out there, but I really don't care much for this game. I've never really been that good at Puyo Puyo games. I guess I'm just not big brain enough to keep up with all of this shit. Jesus Christ, what the fuck? But if you've ever played a Puyo Puyo game before, then that's pretty much what you're getting here. The Mean Bean Machine itself would go on to reappear as the Chemical Plant Act 2 boss in Sonic Mania as a nice bit of fan service. Although I've gotta imagine this shit is really fucking annoying for speedruns because of all the randomness that they have to account for. Oh, they just skipped the entire fucking thing. Anyway, let's talk about something else because, you know, fuck Puyo Puyo! So at this point, thus far, for Sonic games starring characters other than Sonic, we've pretty much only got a reskinned puzzle game that originally had nothing to do with Sonic. Not to knock Puyo Puyo, but in hindsight, I think it would have been way cooler if we got something a little more original. I mean, typically when you think of Sonic games, you think of something a little more action-oriented, maybe something a little more involved than a fucking puzzle game. So it was only natural to assume that if another of these spin-off games starring one of Sonic's friends came around, it might lean a little more into that aspect of the franchise. Maybe something a little closer to traditional Sonic gameplay. Well, I'm happy to report that Sega did eventually deliver on an entirely original game in this fashion. And one day, finally, fans were treated to— Let's just not talk about that. Sometime after Tails and the Music Maker, though, we actually would see a fully fledged video game starring Tails made for humans who like to have fun, in the form of Tails Sky Patrol, which was released for the Sega Game Gear in 1995, although this game was originally released only in Japan. It wasn't until it was included as an unlockable mini-game in Sonic Adventure DX in 2003 that fans overseas would get to play this game officially. This game is kind of shrouded in mystery for a number of reasons, the first of which being, who the fuck are these people? I mean, the only character that isn't a wholly original character for this game is, well, Tails. And as far as I'm aware, none of these characters would ever be seen again, at least not in any meaningful way. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not too beat up about it or anything, although some of these characters are kind of hilarious in concept. Like, look, here's the main villain of the game. Guess what her fucking name is? Yeah, her fucking name is Witch Cart. A very inspired, very original name. I kinda wonder though, if you were to take the witch out of the cart, would she still be Witch Cart? Or just witch, I guess. The name kind of implies that the cart is a core aspect of her identity, so I like to think that the cart is physically fused with her body like some kind of horrible Lovecraftian amalgamate nightmare. But yeah, this is pretty much Baby's first shoot-'em-up game. Kind of a weird choice for a Sonic spin-off game, but again, it is an action game, unlike Mean Bean Machine, and at least it's a completely original concept rather than being a reskin of an existing game like before.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
So when the game started development, it actually had nothing to do with Tails, and it definitely didn't have anything to do with Sonic. In fact, the game wasn't even originally meant to have been released for the Game Gear at all. According to a Twitter thread created in 2015 by one of the game's programmers, the game that eventually became Tails Sky Patrol was originally a game starring a different, unspecified character that this programmer couldn't really talk about, presumably due to licensing agreements. This game was originally slated for release as as a launch title for an unnamed handheld gaming console that was eventually canceled, but when the console got shelved, so did this Tails-less version of Tails Sky Patrol. After that, the developers of the game decided to go to Sega to see if they could port the game to the Game Gear due to the console apparently having a similar architecture to this mystery handheld the game was originally slated for, and Sega agreed under the condition that the game be reworked to star Tails. Interestingly, in the April 1995 edition of the Japanese Sega Video magazine, some prototype gameplay was shown off for Tails Sky Patrol. This gameplay featured what looks to be Disney's Peg Leg Pete in place of what would eventually become this bear character called Behringer. This led to speculation that the original version of Tails Sky Patrol was meant to have included Mickey Mouse and other Disney characters in place of Tails and fucking Witch Cart.
Oh boy, my favorite seat. Excuse me, do you mind?
Which that programmer from earlier could neither confirm nor deny, so it seems likely that this was probably the case. It's fascinating to think that this Disney-themed version of the game could still be out there, so maybe one day my highly underdeveloped ape brain can finally enjoy the visage of some shitty mid-90s, incredibly obscure, mostly don't actually like playing Okay, so we got a Tails game, but it was Japan only, and it wasn't really a Tails game, it was more of a Tails-themed game. So did we ever get a proper Tails game? One that starred Tails in an entirely intentional fashion and wasn't just a hasty rebrand of a pre-existing game? Or, you know, whatever this was supposed to be? Well, actually, yes. Now you've heard of Sonic Adventure, but what about Tails Adventure?
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
Or I guess Tails Adventures? It's actually listed as Tails Adventure with an apostrophe in Sonic Generations, so I guess the adventure is possessive? Anyway, this is the first Tails game to be released in the West, and it's also the last Tails game we ever got. You know, not counting the fucking McDonald's LCD toys or whatever.
Tails sucker!
It's a pretty fun little game, but it's definitely quite a bit slower paced than a typical Sonic game. This game focuses more on exploration and less on speed and platforming. It's closer to a Metroid game than a Sonic game in that way, but for a quirky little sidebar in Sonic's history, it's not bad. I don't really have a whole lot of interesting shit to say about this game. I mean, it is a game, and it does star Tails.
What else do you fucking want from me?
Now, there were 2 other games starring characters from Sonic's supporting lineup, but I think I'm gonna have to hold off on talking about those this time. Each of those games could fill 2 whole videos on their own. I mean, come on, there's just way too much baggage to unpack here. What do you expect from me? I'm not a fucking miracle worker. Anyway, that's pretty much all I've got for today. I'll probably be talking about Shadow the Hedgehog and Knuckles Chaotix at some point in the future, so if that's something you want to see, consider, you know, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. In the spirit of Halloween, next video is going to be my first 3 a.m. challenge video entitled Do Not Call Sonic the Hedgehog at 3 a.m. OMG, he picked up, almost pooped myself. Here's a preview.
That's Crane the Building Man coming at you with another lead video as always. Today I'm going to be calling
Sonic the Hedgehog.
Hello?
So I do a little blow. What's the big fucking deal? It's not like it's affecting the kid, for God's sake. For all I know, the kid isn't even fucking mine. Good luck getting me into the fucking LabCorp for a DNA test. To be honest, I think she knows that I got coke in my system, and she made the whole kid thing up just to get me into one of those fucking rehab sessions. Makes me want to tear my fucking hair out. I just get... Ah!
Alright, man, I understand where you're coming from, man, but bro, this is not going to end well for you. I'm telling you right now, you being greedy is not going to end well for you. Why risk your freedom, man? I understand you need money. There's things you could do, other things you could do, man. You know what I'm saying? You could go get a job, bro. How about you get a job, right? And then you use that money to invest. Nobody's telling you to work at a 9 to 5 the rest of your life. You make that 9 to 5 money, and then you invest that 9 to 5 money so you never got to work the 9 to 5 again.
You know, that's actually some really good advice. Thanks, man. Thank you. Do you have any coke?
What?